The first step in studying how music works and studying music theory is learning how to read and write music, or in other words, learning how to translate sounds into graphics. There are many ways to do just that, to notate music, just like there are many alphabets in the world, but we'll focus on the Western classical way of musical notation, which has increasingly become standard throughout the world at this point. The visual representation of a piece of music or song is called a score, and it looks just like this. All of these symbols are telling the performer which sounds to produce and how to produce them, and once a pianist gets a hold of this score and plays it, it sounds like this. This, by the way, is called the Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. You can see that over here by Frédéric Chopin. It's one of his most famous compositions. So if you've heard it before, it's not a big surprise, really. It's been featured in films and TV and a lot of other media. You will soon be able to make sense of this whole score, but first we have to break it down and start from the very beginning. A pitch is an audible musical sound. It can be very low, it can be very, very high, or anything in between, really. So when you pluck a guitar string or press a piano key, you hear a pitch, like this, a low pitch. Or a very high pitch. Pitches are represented in music by notes. Just like in languages, sounds are represented in print with letters. Notes are written as black or white oval shapes on a staff, just like this. There is a distinction between black and white note heads, but it's not one that is important at this point, so don't worry too much about it. Just know that they can be either filled or unfilled, black or white. You can see that the staff that these note heads are laid onto consist of 5 parallel lines, which then create 4 spaces between the lines. The note heads are placed on the lines or in the spaces between them, and each position refers to a different pitch. The rule of thumb is the higher you go on a staff, the higher is the pitch indicated. And the lower you go on a staff, the lower is the pitch indicated. Listen to these sequences of pitches and pay attention to how sound relates to what you see. Here's the first one. By the way, I'm playing everything at just a regular, ordinary, run-of-the-mill upright piano. So did you notice that when you were listening to those pitches, that the greater the distance between two notes, the greater the difference in pitch height? Notes placed on adjacent positions, like these ones, or really any other ones that are featured in a space and then the other one on a line above or below it, or vice versa. These notes form what we call steps, right? So steps are 2 adjacent notes. If the melody moves from a note to a non-adjacent note, no matter which note it is, that's called a leap or a skip. So basically, everything that is not a step is a leap. Steps and leaps are the 2 ways in which different notes may succeed each other and form a melody. They can also be qualified as ascending or descending, like in these examples. It's pretty self-evident. Ascending steps and leaps, the first note is lower than the second one, and descending steps and leaps, the first note is higher than the second one. So you may have noticed that between the 5 lines and the 4 spaces of the staff, you only have 9 possibilities for different notes. but common sense indicates to you and to me and to everyone really who has heard music before in their lives that music must consist of more than just 9 possible notes. So enter ledger lines. Ledger lines represent notes that are either too high or too low to be shown in the score, or on the staff in this case. Ledger lines are a little bit abstract to understand, but the principle is this. You extend the staff by drawing extra lines to it, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many you need. And these lines are short enough so that they're only applicable to the particular note head that you're trying to apply it to, right? So just to that one note that is too high or too low for the score. So the staff still has 5 parallel lines, but for that note that is too high or that note that is too low, you apply the necessary number of ledger lines above or below the staff so that you expend the possibilities of the numbers of notes that a staff can hold. So the principle is you have the 5 lines and the 4 spaces. When you reach the top line and you want a note that is higher than that, you place that note first on the first space above the staff. And then it goes to the next line, an imaginary 6th line, just like that. And then it goes to the space above that imaginary 6th line. And then it goes to the imaginary 7th line, right? But you're drawing both 6th and 7th lines to indicate that. Those are the ledger lines. The same principle applies if you're going too low for the staff. So you can go first to the first space below the staff, then to the first line below the staff, and then to the second line, the second space, right? Right below the first line below the staff, etc. So it's really important to notice too that there are no lines above the note heads when you go above the staff, and there are no ledger lines below the note heads when you go below the staff.